This is shameful, to say the least, according to me.
Absolutely. And I think we really have to remember where we are. We're nearly 2 years into this pandemic. We still have pharmaceutical corporations and rich countries turning their backs on the catastrophic vaccine supply shortages across the African continent, across the poorest countries of the world. These companies have made billions in profits while fueling that vaccine inequality, have completely refused to share the vaccine know-how so that local manufacturers, including in South Africa, could have made these vaccines. And now these same companies, we've seen evidence, are seeking to terminate the efforts led by the WHO in partnership with South Africa to make mRNA vaccines. We really do think that this is shameful, when nearly 90% of people across Africa have still not been fully vaccinated.
Do they have the right, do they have that authority to tell us to stop with the manufacturing of the COVID-19 vaccines?
Absolutely not. And that's why it must be heavily resisted by all parties, including the South African government. You know, we hope that South African manufacturers will not listen to this scaremongering. And we hope that the WHO and developing country manufacturers will continue their endeavour to develop mRNA vaccines on the African continent. What it does say more than ever is that the rich countries that are currently obstructing the South African and Indian-led proposal to suspend the pharmaceutical monopolies, suspend the patents and the intellectual property rules around these vaccines, they must stop blocking those proposals and start supporting. And, you know, the next week's EU-AU summit is a perfect opportunity for the European Union to demonstrate that it's on the side of people and not profits.
But this highlights also the monopoly in the pharmaceutical industry, doesn't it? Not only in terms of the international world versus the African countries and how much we need this. I mean, people are sick, people are dying, and therefore they know it gives us no choice but to seek this vaccine. And, you know, it also just highlights how this is a problem overall in the pharmaceutical industry. We've had this before, for instance, with cancer treatment, very expensive treatment, and pharmaceuticals monopolizing on people's health.
Absolutely, and let's not forget the battle from 2 decades ago about access to affordable HIV treatment as well. You know, this model does not work. This pharmaceutical monopoly does not work. It's all about funneling public money to the pockets of very rich shareholders and denying access to life-saving technologies for the vast majority of people across the world. And that's why, you know, we are calling not only for governments to act now and to step in and change the model so that we can get these vaccines to everybody, but we are also calling on the likes of Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech to share their vaccine technology with the hub in South Africa, so that we can treat these vaccines as global public goods and get them to everybody. That is the quickest way we can protect everyone, and it's the quickest way that we end this pandemic and all of its suffering across the world. You know, we've seen an additional 160 million people pushed into poverty by this pandemic. This is not only about the health impacts, it's also about the impact on lives and livelihoods across the planet.
So stakeholders such as yourselves then, Anna, and all the other governments that are involved in this fight is very important then to open the doors for everything else in the pharmaceutical industry, for Africa not to continue to be left behind.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And I think this mRNA hub in South Africa is a starting point for a new vision of how things should work and how they should have worked from the outset of this pandemic. You know, we saw rich country leaders lining up, declaring that any effective vaccine would be a global public good, and then they did exactly the opposite and allowed the pharmaceutical monopolies to come into play, those few companies to dictate who lives and who dies in this pandemic. This hub is the start of something different. It's very exciting. It should be supported by all governments. And those governments should be calling on the likes of Moderna to immediately share their technology, drop their patents, so that we can develop homegrown vaccines that can meet the local needs of people in developing countries from this point going forward.
Anna, thank you very much for your time here on Newslink. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Anna Marriott, she is the GB Health Policy Advisor for Oxfam.